We all get phone calls throughout our life that turn our blood to ice. It's just an inevitable thing. There are moments when a notification of a notification comes that we don't expect, we don't want to hear. It's inevitable, but all the same, as humans, we condition ourselves semi-consciously that it won't happen to us. About a month ago, I got a phone call from my mom. Actually, it was a text to call her immediately, and I could tell something was wrong. I could tell that something wasn't right. The fact that she was texting me like that, and then I tried to call her phone. I couldn't call her phone. She gave me another number to call. I called that number. It was the ICU of a small little hospital in Western North Carolina. And of course, in that moment, everything goes into full overdrive. Have my parents, I knew they were in the mountains of North Carolina by themselves. Have they had an accident? Is one of them hurt? Is one of them dead? I don't know. Are they in trouble right now? And she's trying to get a rescue. All of my mind, because I'm a story animal, starts playing all these scenarios. And unfortunately, the immediate thing is it starts playing them from a fear-based perspective. And so as soon as I got that text from my mom, everything spun into overdrive. And I had to just literally pull over on the side of the road and do 3 lower body breaths because I had to get my composure enough to think about what I needed to do next. And I've had to do that at a lot of points in my life as a soldier where, I was faced with immediate circumstances that were life and death or very high risk, and I had to take some action to just get my senses about me so that I could do the next thing. Once I kind of got my senses a little bit, I called that number again, and this time a security guard answered. He let me know what had happened and that basically my dad was in the ICU and that my mom had lost her phone in all of that process of getting an ambulance out there. He had fallen into a ditch and she was calling from his phone. And so that was or texting from his phone. So that was what had happened, and that started to fill in the blanks. And without really even thinking about it, I started taking notes, and then I kept driving home. Once I got home, I put in another call to my mom. We helped her locate her phone, which was a very immediate thing. We needed to get her phone so that she and I could then communicate in a bilateral point-to-point way. And once I had her phone, then I could start to calm her down some. I could start to get a better sense of what was going on. By this time, I was home. I grabbed my wife, Monty. She came into the room, and we started, she was much more rational, and she started helping me think about things that we needed to think about. And we started building a timeline on my whiteboard. We started building a timeline, and what we had found is that my dad had had a stroke. We wrote down the estimated time of the stroke. We wrote down the estimated time that he was transported to the small hospital. We knew that he was about to be moved to a larger hospital that had a stroke facility in Asheville. So there was going to be a transit period. That was very high risk. So we recorded that. And then, we let mom and dad go. They needed to go do their thing. They needed to execute. We also knew, Monty and I, that we had things we needed to do. I needed to get to Asheville, but I couldn't just jump in a car and drive. I guess I could have, and I wanted to. That's what my fear-based behavior was screaming to me. Get your ass to Asheville now. Your father is in trouble. And Monty's like, no, that's not going to work. And by the time you get there, you could have gotten a good night's sleep, and taken the plane because you're going to need to sleep and you're not going to get any sleep when you get there. And she was right. She was rational. So who could we get to arrive at the hospital in front of the ambulance that was transporting my dad? Who could make sure that my mom was okay once she got there? She hates driving at night. So we needed to identify relevant parties. We needed to get on the phone, and we needed to start moving in front of, my mom and dad's actual transit. We needed to get my brother, who was on the East Coast of North Carolina. He could get there before me. So all of these things needed to happen, and they were immediate needs that needed to happen, but fear was pressing in. I kept thinking about my dad, the guy who was my hero, the guy who, taught me to throw a baseball, who was always there to chase the monsters away when I was afraid. Now I needed to, and look, I've been in danger before. I've been in high-risk situations, But when it's a loved one, it's accentuated a little bit differently. And, so all the fear stuff was pressing on me. That's the point I'm trying to make to you. But we kept moving through it, and we kept recording on the whiteboard and trying to stay in front of it. And eventually, Dad got to this new hospital. They administered the TPA drug, which saved his life. And a lot of our relatives and friends were at the hospital to help transition and help Mom. I got on the plane and I was there. And then the next phase of everything started to happen, a lot of which I reported to you all through my personal Facebook page. And by the way, thank you for all the love and prayers. But I cite this example because, of all the stuff that I've been through in my life, and granted, I haven't been through nearly as much as a lot of my special forces and special ops brothers, but I've had my share. This one tested me. At 51 years old, this event tested me greatly. And it was fear, And so this month, we're talking about scars all year in Rooftop Leadership at our rally point here. And I want to talk about fear as a pain point for us. I want to talk about how do we deal with fear, as a scar, as an obstacle, as a challenge in our life, and maybe even how do we harness fear or repurpose it like we do our struggles into something productive, or at a minimum, how do we lead through it? And that's what I want to talk about this month. And so this particular vlog episode is about leading through fear. How do we lead through moments like what I encountered, or the coronavirus, or whatever, whether it's in our personal life or in our family, or in our community, or in our business. We need leaders, you guys, who can lead through fear. Because the reality is fear is a normal human function. It's kept us alive for hundreds of thousands of years. It is a fight, flight, or freeze thing. It is a primal reality. Fear motivates us, fear drives us. But in many ways, in today's world, fear can be a great inhibitor to us meeting our goals. If we allow fear to dominate us, it can have a prolific effect on stopping us from achieving the goals or the higher purpose we want to achieve. And fear is contagious, right? Fear can spread through the ranks very rapidly. If we allow fear to dominate our mind, it's almost impossible to get to where we want to get on our goals and objectives. And then other people, in its primal, will pick up on that fear and they'll be afraid as well. So what do we do about that? Well, I sat down after this event because I believe in just being super honest and authentic and relatable about the things I go through in my life. And maybe we can just share as a conversation here, what were some takeaways that I had from that moment that were informed by decades of special operations experience and working with some of the bravest, most courageous women and men on the planet. And I'll tell you some of the things that I did, some better than others in this moment that maybe are replicable in these moments for you, even like with the coronavirus. The first thing I did was when I got the news, I stepped back. When we have an incident, one of the most important things we can do once we deal with right now is, can I step back even a couple of steps? Take a knee and drink water, as we say in the military. Take a step back, and that's what I had to do. And then breathe. 3 lower body breaths, like Dr. Belisa Veronich teaches us, expanding on the inhale, and then squeeze belly to spine on the exhale. That will help take us from a sympathetic to a parasympathetic state so that we can do the next function well. Okay, so just 3 lower body breaths. And then remember that the first report is always wrong, right? I learned that as an operations center director in combat, managing 28 to 50 ODAs and SEAL platoons in the mix. The reports come in, the first report is always wrong because there's ambiguity, there's complexity, there's confusion, there's emotion, there's fear. So when reports come in, they're always wrong. We got a lot of information about my dad initially that was wrong, right? But people just were reporting what they saw. So when you get the news, you should always assume that at least some degree of that report is probably wrong. And what we want to do is continue to accumulate the facts over time. So getting in a place where you can write down the facts as they come in or have someone do it as they will illuminate, like through a fog bank, they'll start to reveal themselves. Another thing I tell people is really try to stay away from headlines and 24-hour news, right? It's okay to check in on that. But if you're checking in on that like it's a drug and I got to get the next thing, I got to get the next thing. That's what I did after 9/11. I was obsessed with the 24-hour news cycle, and just understand that those organizations, they understand fear-based behavior and they know how to draw you in. And that is not going to help your ability to lead through the situation, right? So and the same thing like calling the person that's in the situation, if you're removed from it, every 5 minutes asking what's going on. That's not helpful leadership. Rather, think about what they need in front of them and where you can help them, which makes the next thing important, which is to bring in a rational thought partner. I brought in Mann because it wasn't her father. It's her father-in-law, but she's rational. She can help me start thinking through things. I can start bouncing things off of her. One of the biggest questions we asked each other was, what can we control right now? What can we influence? And that's where we want to focus. Identify what we can't focus, put that on the board as well, right? A whiteboard is a really helpful thing in these situations, or some kind of thing where everybody can see. And just doing those things brings your emotional temperature down and it keeps you focused. The next thing is to start to make a plan to plan, as I call it. You may not have the facts and you may not know what you need to do next, but you can start to put a timeline together of when it happened and what we want to do and how much time do we have right now between those. For example, I wanted to get to North Carolina as soon as possible. I knew what time the stroke happened. I knew, I needed to be there by morning. So that's a nice bookend time frame. So what can we start doing with that available time? Time is a resource at this point, and we can start thinking about that. Again, it helps us get control of the situation and focus on what we can actually get done. Build a timeline of the facts that you know. Find out who the constituents are in the problem. Like we knew in this situation, my dad, my brother, my mom, my uncles, right? Friends that could come help out. I started looking at the relevant constituents in the problem and seeing what do we need to do in relation to them, right? And how do we need to communicate with them? And I want to over-communicate with them in the process. Right? Same way with the coronavirus. If you're leading your organization during that period of time, what's the timeline going on? What's our available time right now? What's our overall goal? And then who are the constituents in the problem? And how do we want to communicate with them? And how do we bring them in to the collaborative framing of this problem and really work together? How do we communicate with each other? How do we define that? You see what I mean? This is what we can control and how we can take care of a situation. And then breathe some more. Step back, reassess, reacclimate, reattune to your environment. Ask yourself open-ended questions about where we are right now. Reattune, help everybody else reframe, get their perspective, and continue to breathe. We want to stay in that parasympathetic state and continue to over-communicate as you go and with those relevant parties. And remember that fear is contagious, but so is leadership. Good leadership will pervade through the organization as well. And this isn't easy. I understand that. This takes training. It takes training on a day like today, right? If you really want to be able to do crisis management and lead through situations like this, even for yourself, even for your family, talking about it and working on it with your family, with yourself when the sun is shining so that you can execute when the storm clouds roll in. This isn't a perfect list, but it works. And it helps you keep your feet on the ground, stay in your body, and be that relevant, relatable leader that people need. Because here's the thing, no one else is coming. Right? Watch what's happening with the coronavirus right now. Watch the sensationalism around this event. Go back and look every year at sensational events that have happened. I'm not minimizing it. I'm not. I'm simply saying, are the leaders at all different levels at institutions that we typically rely on to lead us through, are they pragmatically leading us right now? Right? Are you pragmatically leading your people? Because what we cannot do is panic. What we cannot do in any situation is surrender to fear, because then we're done. We cannot lead through that situation. And this is all about how we do that. So we train ourselves when the sun is shining on pragmatic ways to manage the fear as energy and continue to lead through it. And then we execute when the storm clouds roll in. That's what people need today. That's what your family needs. That's what your community needs. That's what your organization needs. So do the work now. Practice it now. Like if you want to use the coronavirus or any of the crisis going on in your lives, it's never too early to start. Think about these things I've talked about, see where you can implement them in your life, and be that relevant, relatable leader that we all need when the storm clouds roll in. Until next time, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the rooftop.